When I first started, I was 13.
Dad was 14.
I was only 12 years old. At the time, he was like, what, 29, 30?
We've turned a blind eye to the millions of adult men in this country who create the demand because they believe they have the right to purchase another human being. And we've allowed the juvenile justice and criminal justice systems to treat victims of heinous violence and abuse as criminals while the adult men who've bought and sold them go free. We've sent 12, 13, 14-year-old girls to juvenile detention facilities and ignored the fact that these children aren't often even old enough to legally consent to sex and are in fact statutory rape victims.
We look at places like the Philippines and Thailand and the Ukraine, and we talk about trafficking and sexual exploitation in other countries, and yet when it's happening 2 blocks away from this auditorium, when it's happening in Bedford-Stuyvesant or in Hunts Point or in Queens Plaza, we look the other way. But I tell you what, it's hard out here for a 13-year-old girl who has run away from home, who is forced to sell her body every night.
It's only really recently that there's been a concerted effort to view and treat American girls as trafficking victims. As a nation, we've graded and rated other countries on how they address trafficking within their borders, and yet have effectively ignored the sale of our own children within our own borders. Including San Diego, Tennessee, Hawaii, Miami, Tampa, Indiana, Oakland, Portland, Ohio, Connecticut, Philadelphia. All of these places are witnessing the sale of children in their own communities, and yet few have any resources to address this issue.
So how can we... GEMS is the only nonprofit in New York State that provides alternatives to incarceration for victims of sexual exploitation. There are the other people who feel like, you know, no, go away for a year because you're a prostitute.
Slowly, we're beginning to use the appropriate language, recognizing that calling children who are victims of rape, sexual assault, and violence prostitutes is neither helpful nor accurate. Using the terminology child prostitution or child prostitute conjures up stereotypes and misconceptions about who these children are and how we should treat them. It's critical that we accurately label this crime against children as commercial sexual exploitation and domestic trafficking. In doing so, we can begin to make the shift from treating these youth as criminals and instead treating them as victims, which they rightfully deserve.
In any other situation, she would be too young to consent to sex. To have her charged on prostitution charges is a little absurd.
She's treated like a criminal after all the stuff that happened to her. Instead of them taking her to the hospital, they took her to the jailhouse.
I think it's one of the most despicable things anybody can do.
You're my mother. You know how that makes me feel?
Services work, support works, love works. When girls are afforded the opportunity to be safe and valued and cared for, they're able to thrive and flourish.
You deserve to just have a regular life. You deserve to go back to school and get a job and work in a pet store and do all the things that you want to do.